What's going on, Nerd Nation? This is Sleevecard signing in, and today we're going to be talking about hyper offense. More specifically, hyper offense in the RU metagame on today's episode of Test That Team. Alright guys, so today's Test That Team comes to us courtesy of everybody, really, out on Smogon. But no, seriously, it comes to us courtesy of a user named Everybody. So while I like everybody, specifically this everybody, thank you for letting us use and abuse and break down your team, even though, honestly, you don't know that I'm doing it right now. So, I'm going to have the team, as the team is running down the left-hand side, I almost said right, but the left-hand side there, so as you guys are looking at the team, let me go ahead and explain to you how this team works, just to kind of speed up that episode so we're not here for 30 minutes. But how this team works, as you can see as it scrolls by, so obviously your lead there is going to be Crustle. So you have Crustle here pretty much as a suicide lead, so it's going to come in, set up stealth rocks, set up spikes, and do what it needs to do before getting KO'd. Holds the Figgy Berry and Sturdy to kind of combo out to get as many turns in as possible. So hopefully you can at least get Stealth Rocks up and then a layer, maybe 2 layers of spikes. I know one time when I was using it, testing this team out, I was able to get all 3 layers of spikes plus Stealth Rocks up, which just caused all kinds of havoc for the team. But it also does come with the Earthquake and Stone Edge, which I find really useful. Stone Edge in particular, because one of the things that the creator of this team mentions in his post, and one of the things I really did experience quite a bit using it, is you're going to run across a lot of Zatus. Like, Zatu freaking Palooza is going to happen on your screen when you're using this team. And I get it, I understand why people like to swap into it, but if you can predict that swap, go for that Stone Edge, get the damage, get like the easy hit off, that kind of thing, because otherwise you're going to run into that Zatu, who's just going to magic bounce all your hazards back to you. So the Stone Edge is really nice. Now, while I think that's really smart and surprising to run that Stone Edge, and it sets up the leads, the next Pokemon is really useful as well, and that's going to be Miss Magius. Now, or Miss Magus, whatever. Miss Magius really works well with Crustle, and Miss Magius is going to come in for this to spin block and to use Will-O-Wisp and Taunt and whatnot to kind of cripple out opposing sweepers. Because the big thing with hyper offense is it's really sweeping the metagame these days. No pun intended, but yeah, pun intended. The hyper offense like theme, as it were, is really taking hold on the metagame at all tiers, and I think it's gotten more and more prevalent as each generation passes, and you get more of like the stat creep and the power boosts and that kind of thing, because each freaking generation has another power creep that wants to outdo the last power creep. So Miss Magus comes in to help slow down those opposing hyper offenses, because more often than not you're going to see your hyper offense against another hyper offense. And it really works well with Crustle. So you'll have Crustle come in, set up the hazards, as it were. Then Miss Magus is going to come in to prevent any spin block, or to spin block, rather, to prevent any, like, rapid spinning. So those two will work well. And then you have, really, the rest of your team is going to be what operates as that hyper offense. So those first 2 Pokemon are really there to set the, kind of the tone and set the pace for the rest of your team. So to wear down other hyper offenses and things of that nature. Now, you're going to have your next 3, which are going to be really your sweepers, which are Braviary, Samurott, and a Selgor. Those are going to really be the hyper offense in and of itself, in the sense that, I mean, Braviary, Samurott, they're really going to come out, dish damage. A Selgor as well is really just going to, their whole goal is going to be to come out and just dish out as much damage as fast and as strong as possible, and really sweep. So those are your 3 sweepers right there. And then last but not least, we have Silvally on the team. Now, Silvally is a little odd ball of a pick, to be honest with you, but I kind of feel like I understand why it's on here, and that's that Silvally kind of operates on this team as like a catch-all. So, in other words, you're going to have Silvally come out. Silvally is going to be that thing where it's like, oh, the 3 sweepers don't really have an answer to this. Let me send out Silvally. So when you come across things like, let's say, Golbat, or let's say, what's another good example? Well, let's just go with Golbat, because that's the only one popping to my head off the top of my head. But when you come across those things, you know, your other 3 sweepers aren't going to really deal with, let's say, Golbat, for example. So that's where Silvally really comes in. It's sort of like that catch-all, like, it's going to be able to dish out some damage via Thunderbolt, and it'll have that stab Thunderbolt because of the electric memory. You'll have Surf to do at least neutral damage to a lot of the metagame, and the same goes for Shadow Ball. And then Parting Shot's there to help set up your other sweepers. So you can use Parting Shot, and you can swap out, and you can send out your sweepers again. And hopefully you can apply enough pressure with Parting Shot by dropping their sweepers attack, special attack, that maybe they end up having to force a swap on their end. They have to switch out, and they run through your hazards again and get chip damage and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cyclical. So pretty much the main thing is to get Crustle out, get as many hazards out as feasibly possible, and then trade out into your sweepers, and then kind of hold on to Silvally and hold on to Mismagius as your protection, like your security blanket in case anything kind of goes south on you. The real big sweeper for this team, honestly, out of those 3, while it is hyper offense, you do have one primary sweeper, and I feel like that primary sweeper in this one is going to be Samurott. So Samurott kind of operates as like your traditional setup sweeper, where you're going to have Swords Dance come up, he's going to get his +2 attack, and then you're just hitting with big attack moves. So you'll have the Waterfall and the Mega Horn that are going to do really solid damage. In the case of Waterfall, you're going to have stab damage as well, and it's also a max invested attacking Pokemon. So between the Adamant Nature, the max investment in attack IVs, plus Swords Dance, all that stuff, you're really going to come out and dish a heck of a lot of damage. And then of course you have Aqua Jet as well to give you that that nice priority kind of move to help pivot your team around and to help just get as much chip damage and quick hits in it as you need to. Now, with that being said, the team does a couple things really well, and I want to highlight on at least like 3 pros and 3 cons in each of these videos. So a couple of things this team does really well, and I think is a really good pro for the team, is one, I feel like Crustle and Mismagius really make a surprisingly solid core. And by that, what I mean is, if you look at this team, you really don't see those 2 Pokemon, let's say, necessarily forming a core. Like, if I look at the entire Pokédex, the odds of me taking Crustle and the odds of me taking Mismagius and going, oh, there's my core right there, very slim. But it does make a really solid core, because if you look at their let's say, purpose on this team, they actually complement each other really well. So, like I said, Crustle's here to set up as much hazards as humanly possible. And to that end, you're going to have Stealth Rocks, you're going to have Spikes, and stuff like that. Now, where Mismagius complements it is in the fact that Mismagius operates as a really quality spin blocker, especially in RU. If this was OU, UU, something like that, I definitely wouldn't put those together as a core. But for RU, this actually functions really well. So you're going to have Mismagius come out, not only operate as a spin blocker, but then you also have to look at things like Taunt. You have to look at things like Will-O-Wisp that are going to break down their sweepers as well for in the case of an opposing hyper offense. In the case of something that maybe is a solid tank or wall that your sweepers in and of themselves won't be able to break through, Will-O-Wisp also does a really quality job there, because you're going to be able to get that consistent damage off. Now, the one thing I would say is a little odd about Mismagius is the fact that it runs Farium Z. So Farium Z, of course, is so you can use Twinkle Tackle, which I think is getting bigger and bigger in the metagame itself. So Twinkle Tackle is getting really big in the higher tiers, I think, on Mimikyu. So I see a lot of Mimikyus running Twinkle Tackle. Mismagius is an odd fit for it, I think, just because, one, it's not fairy type, and two, it seems like a really odd use of the Z move. However, that Twinkle Tackle does really well for taking on any like dark, any fighting threats, things of that nature. So one of the big jokes on this team, and I'm not saying joke slight on this team, but one of the big jokes that everybody uses for this team, and I do mean in this case everybody, the author of this team, is the title of his team is Hitmontop Hates These Trainers. And that's the one thing I can say honestly holds true when it comes to this Farium Z Mismagius, is because Twinkle Tackle is just going to rock a Hitmontop, which is really good because Hitmontop is honestly going to come out and probably be the biggest threat as far as Rapid Spin this team is going to see. So if you have Crustle and he sets up, let's say, at least one Stealth Rocks, maybe one Spike, something like that, and then he gets his KO and he goes down, well then, if they send out Hitmontop, you can instantly counter with Mismagius knowing that they're going to go for the Rapid Spin turn 1. So you can instantly do a switch in, get Mismagius out, block the Rapid Spin, and then possibly go for your Twinkle Tackle. And if not KO Hitmontop, you'll at least get really close to KOing Hitmontop. And then, of course, you have your Stab Shadow Ball, which works well also. Now, another thing it does really well is Crustle makes a really solid suicide lead, and I already kind of touched upon this, but Crustle makes a really, really solid suicide lead in the sense that 1, you have Stealth Rocks, 2, you have Spikes, but then it takes its biggest threat, which in this case is going to be that Xatu, and it's going to be things like Steelix, it's going to be things like Rhydon, stuff like that, and it actually works well to counter them with the Stab, or not even Stab, with the Solid Earthquake and with the Stab Stone Edge. So Crustle makes a great suicide lead. Crustle and Mismagius work together really well. And then the third thing I want to touch upon that this team does really well before we look at things that it doesn't is a Selgor. And now, I've used a Selgor before in the past. I haven't really used it so much in Sun and Moon. I've used it in Black and White. I've used it just a little bit in X and Y. So I am really aware of what a Selgor can do, and I think a Selgor does really well in this team and in the context of this team. And by that, I mean a Selgor can come out, hit with a Bug Buzz, and even if it's a neutral Bug Buzz where it's not resisted, but it's not super effective, it can still dish out a really solid amount of damage. So just having a Selgor there with the ability to kind of come out, hit with Bug Buzz, and you know a Selgor is really going to outspeed a vast majority of RU, especially with that high speed investment. So a Selgor is going to come out just Bug Buzz, Bug Buzz, Bug Buzz, and it's going to start punching holes in that team, or in the opposing team is what I mean. But I think a Selgor does really well in that case. Now, some things this team does not do so well, because every team's got its cons. So just a couple things this team does not do so well. Hazards. I feel like dishing out hazards, it does great, but this team really gets worn down by hazards. So if you're running this team, you have to keep an eye out for the receiving end really of hazards. And by that, I mean, if you look at, let's say, the what are there, 4 hazards now? If you really look at the 4 hazards, I'll call them, Spikes will do pretty much damage to anything. It won't do a massive amount of damage, but it'll slowly kind of wear down a lot of stuff. So Spikes isn't that much of a concern. Now, Stealth Rocks is a concern, because you're going to have 2 of your sweepers are weak to Stealth Rocks. So you got to look at a Selgor's not going to take a Stealth Rocks very well. And Braviary is not going to take Stealth Rocks very well. So if you have 2 of your sweepers and they're going to have to swap in and into Stealth Rocks, it does not handle it well. Sticky Web also really hinders this team, because Sticky Web is going to slow this team down quite a bit. And then you also have to look at Toxic Spikes, which will do also a lot of damage to this team just through the wearing and tearing on the team. And the reason for that is this team, which also leads me into the second issue I have with it. The team's very heavy on predictions. And the reason for that is 2 of your sweepers are choice itemed. So you've got Choice Specs of Selgor, and you've got Choice Scarf Braviary. So you're going to send those out, and let's say Braviary is going to Brave Bird over and over and over again, possibly hit with like Superpower or Return or U-Turn if the case justifies it, but 9 times out of 10 I feel like you're going to come out and you're just going to hit for Brave Bird. And the same goes for Selgor. You're going to come out 9 times out of 10 and hit for Bug Buzz. Now what happens is you're going to lock into those 2 moves because of the choice items, which means if I know, hey, you're going to come out with a Selgor, you're going to hit with Bug Buzz, well, I'm going to send in something that's going to resist you, and it's going to force you to swap out. Now, as soon as you swap out, now you've got to come in through those hazards once again. So the hazards really wear it down. The fact that their choice items really don't benefit your ability to handle hazards, because having the choice items are going to force you to swap more and more and more, which means you run into those hazards again and again and again, and it'll slowly wear your team down over and over again. Now, in addition to the hazards, you also have to look at just the prediction abilities and all, because with them both being locked into choice items, you're going to have a lot of times where, let's say, I send out a Selgor again. Not only do I have to make that swap where I'm dealing with all those hazards, but because I'm locked into a move, if somebody can send out a counter to a Selgor, well, I have to make that switch. I can't leave something out like that that's just going to get destroyed by a hit or two from something that's super effective. So by making that switch, and with us being locked in, we don't have any pivoting moves, so we're forced to lock in and give away a free turn to somebody. So having those kind of slow prediction things, locked into the choice scarfs, and dealing with the hazard items, or the hazards, really wear the team down. And then my last kind of concern I want to touch on for this team is Silvally. Now, Silvally, I didn't talk too much when I was talking about how the team works, but just to go over it a little bit more, it is just kind of a catch-all. So Silvally comes out. It's one of those things where, like, Electric is okay defensively. It's got Stab, Thunderbolt, but it really doesn't do any one thing amazingly. It just kind of comes out and it's like, my other 5 Pokemon couldn't deal with this, so I have Silvally, which will deal with everything neutrally. So it seems like an odd fit. It's not the worst fit in the world, but it does seem like an odd fit. Now, if it were up to me, I would probably swap out Silvally for something else. I'm a big, like, just glancing at the team and having played with it a couple times, I'm a big believer in, like, Torkoal. Now, Torkoal's like an odd fit as well, and I'll grant that. Torkoal's not the best fit, but I'm also a big believer in Torkoal in general, because not only for this team would it add in another person who can drop Stealth Rocks, another Will-O-Wisper, to kind of go with your leading core there, but it also contains Rapid Spin. So you can also have this come out, Rapid Spin, to get rid of those opposing hazards that are causing issues, and then also potentially add in one other, let's say, stab move like a Lava Plume. Or one of the things I do a lot is I will put him out there with Explosion, so he gets his Stealth Rocks, gets a Lava Plume, and then I just explode off. So, that being said, overall, I really enjoy the team. But now it is time to dish out the grades. So, as you guys know, I grade every team on 5 categories, and those categories are complexity, enjoyment, synergy, versatility, and win probability. So for complexity, I actually went high on this one, so I'm giving it an 8 in complexity, and the reason for that is it is a complex team, and by that I mean you have to understand exactly how to switch. You have to understand exactly how to pivot, how to balance each of your moves and judge each of your turns, because you really can't afford to make a mistake with this team, so it is very complex. And because if you make a mistake, like if I make the wrong swap, if I do something like that, because of the way the hazards will affect it, because of the way I'll be locked into items on some of my sweepers, things like that means I can't afford to give away free turns, because every free turn you give away is going to be something that's just going to come back to haunt you. So I give it an 8 in complexity, because you really have to master this team in order to use it well, I feel like. Enjoyment, I went ahead and gave it a 7, because I actually enjoyed using this team, and I'll tell you why. I didn't enjoy using it because I looked at this team and I was like, oh my god, this is the most competitive sound team I've ever seen. I enjoyed using it, I think, for the same reason that a lot of people will enjoy using it, and that's because they're interesting Pokemon to use. They're Pokemon that, I don't really use that often. Now, granted, I don't go into RU that much. I usually stick up in the UU, I stick up in OU, stuff like that. Or I just go on Wi-Fi and I put together 6 Pokemon of whatever the hell I feel like. Now, that being said, I really enjoyed Samurott in Unova, and I haven't played with Samurott since Unova, so having him in as a sweeper, as a focus of the team, was really enjoyable to me. It was also really enjoyable to me to discover that Crustle and Miss Magius worked really solidly together. So I give it a 7 on enjoyment. Now, synergy, I'm dropping down to a 3. And for that, it's because it just didn't feel right. Like, there was portions of this team that had great synergy. Like, we've talked about Crustle and Miss Magius over and over again. But the rest of the team, the synergy was just like, let me find 4 Pokemon that work well together and put them out there. Or not even work well. Let me find 4 Pokemon that just kind of work as sweepers and use them. I mean, Silvally, we talked about, is kind of an odd choice, so I don't think Silvally has great synergy with the rest of the team. And the 3 sweepers don't really have synergy with each other. It's just kind of like 3 sweepers that maybe cover different aspects of opposing teams. So I'm giving it a little lower on the synergy because I think that could definitely be higher with maybe a couple tweaks here and there. Versatility, I'll give it a 6 because I feel like it's versatile enough that you can do different things with the team, but in its current state, it's not so versatile that it could handle, let's say, a wide variety of attacks or playstyles. So if you run across something that's super hazard heavy, like at one point I actually did run across a team that had spikes, toxic spikes, stealth rocks, and sticky web, like all on the team, and it was just like all hazards. It was all that, and then just started throwing roars at me. Stuff like that where, yeah, it's really gimmicky. Really gave me a hard time with this team because it kept throwing everything for a loop. So I gave that a 6 because it works well, but it could do better. And then last but not least, for win probability, I'm giving it a 3. And I give it a 3 because if this team gets mastered, like if you take the time, you master this team and you figured it out, you can actually win some decent amounts of matches. However, if this team doesn't get going early, like it gets disrupted by something, or you just get thrown off, or you make one misplay, something like that, you lose a match in a second. Like, it just rolls up on you and you're done. So overall, this team's getting a 27 out of 50, which overall is not that bad. Like, it looks kind of low because it's out of 50, but in reality, that is not a bad score. And I feel like what we're looking at is a good team. Like, or I should say, what I feel like I'm looking at is the good skeleton of a team. So I feel like it's a great start. It just could use a little bit more work on it. So I would look at things like, hey, maybe Silvally could get swapped out for something that works a little bit better. Maybe on one of the 2 sweepers, we change out Choice Specs or Choice Scarf for something else. And I get the reason for having the choice items on there, but locking 2 sweepers in makes it really difficult to play, especially if you're newer into the game, or if you're newer into, let's say, using this team or specific Pokemon on this team. But overall, that's where we're at. So that is this week's Test That Team. I am going to go ahead and end today's video right about here because we did overshoot our goal once again. Our goal is maybe 15 minutes tops. So we're at like 24 minutes right now. But with that being said, guys, I do want to give another quick shout out to everyone out there on Smogon. I will go ahead and leave the link to this team, or in the thread it was posted on, in the description down below, so you guys can check it out yourself, check out the reasoning, maybe leave feedback for the creator, whatever the case may be. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. This is Sleevecard signing out. Have yourselves a beautiful day, and I will see you later.